Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to ESG Talks, a KBRA podcast series focusing on environmental, social, and governance, ESG. This podcast series highlights various ESG hot topics and includes commentary from prominent voices within the ESG community. In this episode of ESG Talks, I introduce you to Arianne Schreier, an associate on KBRA's ESG team, who will be taking over as host of the ESG Talks podcast as I transition to a new role within KBRA. We will also be joined by Pat Welch, KBRA's Chief ESG and Ratings Policy Officer, to chat about the outlook for ESG over the next year and how KBRA's approach makes us uniquely prepared for what's to come. Hi, everyone. This is Emilie Nadler, previously a director on KBRA's ESG team and the host of ESG Talks, but I've now transitioned to the Director of Regulatory Affairs within KBRA's Investor Relations team. It's good to be back with both of you, Pat and Arianne. I want to start off by saying that it's been such a great opportunity hosting ESG Talks over the past few years, and though I will no longer be the lead voice on the podcast, I do believe all of our listeners will be in good hands with my colleague Arianne, who is excited to pick up where I've left off. So with that said, Arianne, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience working at KBRA over the past 2 years?
Of course, and thank you so much for the introduction. Your voice will definitely be missed. As for my background, like you said, I've been with KBRA coming up on 2 years now with the ESG team. I joined KBRA after receiving my Master of Science degree from Columbia University in Sustainability Management with an interest in corporate sustainability. Since being here, I've learned so much, and the opportunity to work on the ESG team within a credit rating agency has definitely given me a unique perspective on the intersection of finance and global sustainability. I also want to say it's been a pleasure working with you on the ESG team. Your contribution to KBRA's ESG approach has been so significant from the very beginning. I'm excited to keep the podcast alive as you make an impact on the business development side of things.
Thanks, Arianne, and looking forward to tuning in to future episodes as you take over. So speaking of the year ahead, we continue to have political pushback on ESG in the U.S., and we definitely expect to see this ramping up even more with the upcoming presidential election. But at the same time, we continue to see regulatory activity in both the US and Europe on ESG-related policy, suggesting that even amongst the political backlash, ESG is not going away. So, Pat, I'd like to turn it to you and ask how you see ESG unfolding over the next 6 months or so as we gear up for the US presidential election.
Hi, Emily. Happy to be joining you once again. I think you've really hit the nail on the head with what we can expect from ESG over the coming year. There's been a very real, palpable pushback politically on ESG in the US. This has caused a more careful discussion of ESG by many market participants. And in fact, some have even moved away from using the term ESG. It's our opinion at KBRA that although the term has been politicized, the concepts that it stands for are not going away. Most investors care deeply about it. And certainly ESG factors that have a bearing on credit risk will continue to be a big focus for KBRA. But the point is, ESG is evolving and will continue to evolve. We might see different naming conventions, different priorities, but we are witnessing an evolution, not an extinction. In general, I think there's one big problem with ESG, and that's that there has not been enough of a separation between ESG that is financially material and ESG that is more impact-driven. These two perspectives of ESG, which is a concept sometimes called double materiality, has been around for some time, with one of the perspectives being how ESG materially impacts a company financially, and the other perspective being how a company's activities materially impact the world. Both are extremely important, but it's my view that together, these two perspectives should not have been seen as existing solely in a single arena where all ESG debates and all ESG solutions should be hashed out. Certainly, financially material factors should be addressed in the financial arena, but it's very difficult for the financial markets to be the place for solving societal impact factors that have little or no financial bearing. For many of those factors, the legislative or regulatory arenas are probably more suitable. I personally believe that some of the political, legislative, and regulatory stew that we currently find ourselves in the US has been, at least in part, driven by the ineffective separation of these two ESG perspectives and not fully recognizing the need for different arenas for the debate and solutions of each of those perspectives. Let me give you some color on this as it relates to KBRA. Rigorously derived credit rating can have great utility in the financial markets in that it can help participants in the debt capital markets to appropriately price risk. This can lead to optimal allocation of capital, and then that can lead to efficient markets. Weighing a credit rating down with factors that have no financial bearing, and that includes ESG impact factors that have no financial bearing, that can produce a bad outcome of creating confusion in credit ratings and potentially undermining the efficiency of the debt capital markets. This is why KBRA does not issue ESG ratings inside of or alongside of our credit ratings. ESG ratings often consider many things that have no bearing on a debt issuer's risk of default. We knew from the very beginning that providing ESG scores inside of or alongside of our credit ratings would lead to confusion. So doing this, in our opinion, serves neither credit ratings nor ESG. Credit ratings should be exclusively focused on credit risk analysis.
Thanks, Pat. Those are great points and an interesting perspective to keep in mind as we move further into 2024 and watch what happens with ESG on a more macro scale. With all of that being said, do you foresee any changes in KBRA's approach to ESG?
Yes, I believe KBRA is well suited for the current environment because we're going to continue to focus on credit risk and not on headlines or on politics. Our approach has led us to believe there really are three anchor issues that sit at the intersection of ESG and credit risk. Those are stakeholder preferences, climate change with a particular focus on carbon emissions, and cybersecurity. Of course, there are other ESG credit factors, so these three aren't KBRA's only considerations, but we do see these three as relevant across most sectors and issuers. With that noted, we firmly believe that ESG credit factors require nuanced, often company-specific analysis to understand financial materiality. As with all other aspects of credit analysis, KBRA is focused on being holistic and transparent. We developed our credit-centric approach to ESG more than 3 years ago, and it continues to be our approach today. And we'll continue to focus our efforts in this way as ESG evolves in the political, legislative, and regulatory arenas.
Thanks to both of you for coming on to discuss, and thank you to Arianne for taking the reins as the new voice of the podcast. I hope our listeners enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned for more to come in this new season of ESG Talks.
Thank you to Pat and Emilie for an interesting discussion. This concludes our episode. Please email esg@kbra.com with any questions or comments. We also encourage you to visit KBRA's ESG website at esg.kbra.com, where you can find ESG research related to the topics discussed in this episode, further details on KBRA's ESG approach, and other ESG-related media items. You can also join our mailing list to access our ESG Weekly Roundup newsletter.